Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm going to kick this off and then try to explain what this is. And then I'll hand it over to Bobby, who's going to actually walk you through it. And I'll warn you, this is interactive. It's not us presenting. This is all of us working together to try to solve a problem. So this game is an online version of a card game that came out of a company who specialized in incident response for cybersecurity. And you can get a physical printed copy of cards, or you can play it online. This version that we're using is actually free to play. So if you like what we're doing and want to try it yourself, I've dropped the link in the chat to the actual game. But I want to explain how it works as quickly as I can so that there's lots of time to actually play the game. Effectively, what this does is it simulates some sort of a cybersecurity incident at your location, organization, or in our case, we're looking at it at the national federation level. It picks up 4 primary cards. Each one talks about a specific thing, and I'm going to show you these cards. These aren't the ones we're actually going to do with. It's just an example so you see how it works. So each one of these cards talks about something in particular related to a cybersecurity incident. First one's the initial compromise. It says basically what happened. So in this case, the example is some sort of social engineering. They tricked somebody into revealing their credentials or click through to get some bad software running on their computer. So that's what started the problem. The next card talks about how they make that worse, how they get to a different system, or how they escalate their privileges and do something even worse than they were doing before. So in this particular example, they've gotten a local privilege escalation, which means they started at a user account and they somehow upgraded that to be a full administrator on the system, which would be quite bad from a cybersecurity perspective. For each one of these cards, you'll see that there's a detection section and a tools section. And this kind of gives you an idea of how would you find out that this had happened. That's what is in the detection section. So if you thought somebody had done a local privilege escalation, you might find that by looking at the endpoint, some sort of cyber deception, or endpoint security protection analysis tools. And we'll get to the procedures that you'd follow in a second. The other 2 cards are how they're controlling it or exfiltrating data. So in this case, they're saying they're using Gmail, Tumblr, Salesforce, Twitter as a C2. C2 stands for command and control. And it's basically how attackers take control of the system and continue to issue it commands over time. Again, there's detections for how you might find that. And finally, how do they achieve persistence? Persistence is what most attackers want. It means they want to stay in the system for a long period of time, somehow establishing their presence there so that they can continue to have access to something they shouldn't. So that's the scenario in this particular example. The one we're going to actually play through is different. And the rest of the cards follow this procedure. So you have established procedures. Now, we realize that people are coming to this session from all across Canada with different institutional backgrounds, from different perspectives. People have different procedures at their respective institutions. So we can't possibly guess what everybody would have well established. So we're going to let the game choose for us. And in this case, it picks 4 established procedures. And we're just going to say that you have these at your disposal, which means that there's something that you've practiced, you have written down, documented procedures for how to do these things. And at any point during the game, we can open it up and it'll say what this is. So this is Security Information and Event Management, a SIEM log analysis. And that means a procedure for looking through logs in a security management system and trying to find something in there that gives you an idea of what might have gone wrong. That's a particular procedure. A lot of security groups do this on a regular basis. There's a bunch of other procedures. Any of these procedures, you have a higher chance of being successful. And the way this game works, it's a lot of discussion. We're going to discuss together what we think would be the best procedure to try. And then once we pick whatever procedure that is, we're actually going to roll a dice and see if it's successful. If the die roll is greater than 10, then it's successful. If it's lower than 10, it's not. And these established procedures, you get +3. So anybody who's ever played Dungeons and Dragons or a similar tabletop game, you're starting to see there might be some consistency with things you're familiar with there. All the other procedures, Those ones don't have any modifiers, so you roll the dice, you get whatever you roll. Any of these ones, there's no +3 to those. And again, we're just going to let the game pick them and go with whatever those are. Even if maybe one of these procedures is something that you have documented at your institution, for the purposes of this, we're going to pretend that you don't. A couple more rules, and then we're almost there. Once you try using a card, if you're successful, you can use that card again later. If you're unsuccessful, we're going to put one of these little 3s on it, and you can't use that card again for 3 more turns. And the goal is to try to find out what actually happened, all 4 of these upper cards, using the procedures before we run out of turns. And there's 10 turns. So it could be that you picked the right thing to do, like say endpoint analysis was the correct procedure to attempt to find one of these things, but the dice roll was just a 2. So it's unsuccessful, which sometimes happens. Even if you have an established procedure, it may be unsuccessful. In that case, we'd put the 3 on it. You couldn't try again for 3 more turns, but after that, you could. So that might be something that will come up during the game. Finally, one more trick. If somebody rolls a 20 or a 1, or you fail at executing a procedure 3 times in a row, then we have what's referred to as an inject happens, and we'll draw a special new card from this deck here, which will say something about something that might have happened that you didn't expect, that makes things a little bit more complicated. And that's only in one of those 2 cases. So it's a 20 or a 1 or 3 fails in a row. So I'll take a brief moment if anybody has any questions at this point. But this is basically the game. And for anybody who isn't familiar with cybersecurity, I realize there's a little bit of tech in this. And we'll do our best to answer and walk you through what kind of things you do. Hopefully, we've got some folks here who are a little more savvy with cybersecurity techniques and can kind of offer some suggestions, but this really is interactive. So we're going to need your input as we walk through the actual scenario. And for that, I'm going to hand it over to Bobby if there's no questions. And feel free to unmute and speak up if you want, or in the chat. We'll watch both. Okay, in that case, I'll hand it over to Bobby, and I'm going to switch my screen over to the actual scenario where we're ready to start with a blank slate and a different, it's none of those cards I showed before is actually going to be one of those 4 cards. Over to you, Bobby.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Hi, everyone. I'm Bobby Nika. As mentioned, I'm a cybersecurity analyst for sensitive research with UBC ARC. And this is actually the first time that we're trying this out, that we're demoing this with a sort of in a live, in earnest kind of with an audience. So hopefully it works out well. So basically just to reiterate what Scott already said, the sort of abridged kind of core gist, I guess, of how the crux of the gameplay kind of proceeds is that as we go forward, I will progressively relate to you parts of a narrative relating to the nature of the breach, wherein the description that I provide will corroborate at each stage to each of the 4 attack cards that you see for compromise, pivot and escalation, exfiltration, and persistence. And then at each step, basically the idea is to take into consideration the blue procedure cards that you see there at your disposal, and to contemplate which would be the most appropriate course of action in order to respond to or shed light on or uncover additional key information for the context that I'm describing. That's the basic gist of it. And then from there in, we'll roll dice to sort of determine the success or failure. And I guess really the central point of it is to facilitate sort of discussion, dialogue, and whatnot, to hopefully by the end of it come out with a given group or a given workplace having new insights as to where gaps might exist, or the nature of the various security controls and things of that sort that they have at their disposal. So that said, let's see here. So ready to go. So so in terms of the initial scenario, so our scenario begins at one of the Alliance Federation's cloud computing host sites, where a virtual machine belonging to a research group has been configured to run a web application which receives, processes, and analyzes data residing on an institutional server at another collaborating research institution. Although the project began smoothly and without notable issue, within a few weeks of its commencement, we were notified by the institution that they strongly suspect that the cloud VM has been compromised. And so they report this to our incident response team to investigate further. So with that in mind, that is the initial lay of the land. So with that in mind, and given the cards we have at our disposal, what do we think? What would be the first steps that we would want to go about? Isolate. Okay. So take a look at that. Right. So the isolation card, yeah, I mean, it doesn't really, I guess, what it certainly does is it would prevent further harm. It might also facilitate forensic analysis. In some way, it's not a bad idea. Any other suggestions? Well, firewall log. Right. So yeah, so firewall log, I think, is certainly like a good option there. Just taking a look here within that context, I guess what I had made is I put together a Slido, but absent that, I guess for arriving at a consensus, can I ask, maybe in regards to both firewall log and in regards to the isolation, what is it, I guess, like the thinking that informs that choice? And if perchance you guys are comfortable, maybe coming off of mute, so as to be able to facilitate dialogue to the extent that you are comfortable. If not, by all means, use the chat. But
yeah, I was going to suggest the same, if possible. So we've got
just want to get the ball
four ideas. I need to talk it through and pick one.
I suggested isolation, and that was basically just for what you had said, and that is like prevent further harm and analysis of the system. I mean, you might not be certain that the system has been compromised. I mean, you've got some indication from that other institute that it has, but if you isolate it, if the service that it's offering is not business critical or something like that, and you don't want to take it down on a unverified claim, then you just if it's not critical, take the system offline and review it, then go on to the server analysis and see if you can corroborate the claim of compromise, and then address it from there. So I mean, firewall logs are, I suspect, good if you're watching them actively, but if it's already been compromised, you do that as part of your forensic analysis, not sort of the ongoing, oh my God, something's happening. So that was my hunch anyway. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I see a comment there that says we need to find out if we're actually compromised. Yeah. So how might we do that with these cards that we have in front of us here? Which one would facilitate that? And also another thought I had was in relation to firewall log. Do we know that, like, within the context of the Federation cloud hosts, do we know that those are behind firewalls, or are they DMZ? I sincerely don't know.
I do know they do have ability to do some log reviews. Yeah. So it looks like people have given us an example of every one of the cards. So somehow we're going to have to come to a consensus which one people want to try. Isolation, firewall, endpoint analysis, or server analysis.
We could democratize it because I did actually make the slide out. I was just doing it right before I joined. I'm just going to see if I can grab that link.
Anybody who's not brave enough to come off mute want to vote for another one of the cards in the chat? You can do that too.
So what
Cast your vote in the
of
chat.
the cards, which one has the highest vote count at the moment?
Well, so far we've got one each. We got a second thumbs up for isolate.
Okay. See if we got that. We'll give it a minute or two. Just to see if there's two thumbs up. So isolate is breaking away.
Oh, isolation is breaking away
Okay.
by far.
All right. So it looks like
Okay.
this PM is going to get
3,
isolated.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay.
I think
So
we have a winner.
isolated is. So with that in mind, I'm just going to window back up here. We will take that card and we will roll. So we're going to roll with isolation.
So because it's an established procedure, it gets a +3.
So we're looking for the number to get would be 8 or above.
Oh no.
Oof. No, not even
We
close.
tried to isolate, but it didn't work.
Okay. So yeah, so it looks like isolation was not a successful tactic in this instance. So with that in mind, if it was ineffective in this circumstance, why would it have failed? So what might have been the I guess the mechanism or cause of that?
So just reading out the chat, compromises is one reason it might not have failed. The compromise is spread on that system is not the source of the compromise. So isolating it might not have had any effect because it's already worse than that.
Right. No, very true. Very true. I mean, if it's already if it's been reported from the partner institution, then that certainly bears to reason. Okay, so in this
And
case,
another one from the chat is the intruder might have escalated already.
right. Fair. Okay, so with that in mind, given that isolation has failed to either limit the spread or elucidate any other information in regards to the breach, what would be the next steps that we want to take?
So
So again,
one new vote for the
I'll see. I might have
event
some.
analysis in the SIEM.
I might give some additional, just a couple pieces of additional information here. It's up here. So what we know is that, yeah, so the report came from the institutional, the site that's hosting the server. While there isn't any sensitive data or sensitive information on that institutional or on the VM itself, the database from which it's pulling the data at the other institution does hold some high-risk data that is sensitive, so potentially health information or PI. Additionally, it appears that on oh, I see. Okay, sorry. I don't want to maybe getting ahead of myself.
We've got another vote for firewall log analysis as an alternative. So for this turn so far, we've had one for SIEM event analysis and the other one for firewall log analysis.
Okay.
And I see a couple of thumbs up on the firewall log analysis and one for the SIEM event analysis.
So it sounds like firewall is slightly ahead.
It's ahead by one.
Okay, let's do that. Let's give that a go then. So that's another +3.
So that's the firewall log review. Discard.
That's as
Try a
is
roll on that.
by elk. And we will roll. It's a +3.
Yeah, I definitely think we need new dice. That one also failed.
With the same count.
I got the same roll, but I can tell it did it because it's saying it's a strike 2.
This is a resilient adversary that thought of the obvious things. Let's see here. So let's let me see if I can actually more information here. So upon closer examination, it appears that when the web application was being stood up, one of the grad students who configured the application stack for the VM may have, when he was installing like the LAMP stack, may have installed PHP version 5. PHP version 5, of course, which went end of life and out of security support scope or lifespan as of January 1st, 2019. That's another piece of information here as to, I guess, so mind, where else might we look? If we look at these cards, so we have, for example, we have endpoint analysis, which I mean can glean a lot of information, but in this case, like in terms of the endpoints in the traditional sense, like a laptop or a tablet or desktop, hasn't really come into the equation directly yet. We have server analysis, which is basically the same thing as endpoint analysis, but within the context of the server. And then we have sort of the similar but different in terms of network threat hunting to the firewall log review, which would be sort of like a Zeek or Rita analysis, like you intrusion detection system, something of that nature. Any of these particularly?
We have the previous votes are still in for the other cards. I don't know if anybody wants to double down on those. A new one from John is we're still trying to find compromised systems, so maybe network threat hunting.
So
don't apologize, John. We need participation. Got to get the rest of everybody jumping in there.
Yeah.
Got +2 on the network threat hunting.
And so why, if I'm just out of curiosity, if the firewall log review, in terms of looking at the perimeter, failed to glean anything salient or anything that was super constructive to us, why might or how might the Rita analysis or something like Zeek, which is sort of like an IDS to my understanding, how might that give us some more salient information? So I'm just going to take a look here where we are at. Maybe nice if we had a poll. A firewall. And then we have another one for server analysis that we just got.
With +4 on that one.
On which one?
The server analysis, I got 4 thumbs up on that.
Okay. Okay. So shall we go for server analysis? Seems like not a bad choice to me. Let's take a look at the card here. So the ability to baseline the system and verify that basically what it is, it's to baseline the system and verify that it's operating in a normal state. By the way, this is more than just merely looking at Task Manager or Process Explorer and looking for an evil executable. Okay, so And with that in
We're up
mind,
to we're up to five votes for the server analysis. It looks like that's what
that's what we're going with. Can we also see
looks like a
examples
consensus.
just for kind of enrichment? Can we also maybe see that card, Scott, if you could open it up there?
Absolutely.
Just to take a look at the tools, because I don't, you know, off the top of my head, I'm not really sure, but it's shorthand on the side here, but we could. Doesn't appear to move. You still there, Scott?
Yeah. You want to roll for this one?
Yeah, sure. I was asking if you could actually maybe just open the server analysis card. Just to
Oh,
also
I did.
just
You
to,
did not.
Oh, I didn't see
Oh,
it.
it's my share stopped for some reason.
Okay.
Hold
Okay.
on.
So yeah,
Still
deep
says
blue.
it's paused.
Deep blue. Okay. Yeah, I believe there's a one of the consultant cards I believe invokes that.
I'm gonna stop my share and start it again. It's not letting me resume the share for some reason.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so then let's go ahead and let's roll on that when we get the share back up here, and then just gonna keep my deck.
Okay,
lined up.
there we go. So there's the card.
Right, so we're
You
going
see
for
it now?
server analysis, and that's another +3. And yeah, and deep blue is the
Okay,
it has
I'll roll on this one. Hopefully the dice will be a little more kind this time. There we go, finally.
there we go, 14 +3. So yeah, that's definitely a win. And so what that wins us, or kind of what that does is it successfully turns the card that provided that server analysis is a method for one of the recognized methods for that step there. But go ahead and turn that. Believe
So
it. Believe it is.
we're revealing the initial compromise, correct?
Yes, yes. Right. So firewall log review would have also have worked. It's just that in this case, we when we rolled less than 11. So that sort of amounts to kind of like a circumstantial failure to identify the mechanism of compromise. However, in this case, the analysis of the actual host itself was able to reveal that an external service had a misconfiguration or a publicly available exploit, and the attacker was able to take advantage of this to pivot to an internal resource. And specifically, or more specifically, as we described, in this case, what it was is that the PHP component of the web application stack that was selected was one that was legacy, essentially. It was one that went end of life 3 years ago. So in terms of any vulnerabilities that would have critical security vulnerabilities that would come out in the time since, it would be unmitigated. One question that might be worthwhile to discuss would be what circumstance or what kind of sort of thought experiment could we conduct to try and understand or explain why our firewall log review might not have been able to glean that, or might not have been able to, I guess, be insightful to the exploit the server analysis was.
Any thoughts on why, even though it was the right kind of an approach, it may have failed?
Could it be that because the PHP was misconfigured, the firewall was still allowing PHP traffic, but the traffic that we received was just happened to be taking advantage of our the out-of-date version of PHP?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, because the firewall wouldn't discriminate. Like, it would just see its web traffic. It wouldn't, be able to necessarily glean that it was somehow leveraging like a legacy exploit or something of that nature. No, that makes sense. Any other thoughts? Shall we proceed to the next card?
Just to add to that, it's not every attack that has a lot of traffic. Sometimes it's just the right command sent in will do the job. So if it's a buffer overrun or a root attack, kit attack using maybe like sending a small file that gets installed in there, firewall analysis may not necessarily feel that immediately. The server analysis will show you where the vulnerability is and points where you should probably look harder.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like the signal to noise ratio might be, it could be, and I see in chat there's excess traffic would make log analysis hard. So it could be a tiny little thing which is hard to find, or a whole bunch of stuff and it's buried in there. The other one I always really like to think about with these firewall ones is what's our retention? Do we have enough log retention? Like if this happened 3 months ago, it may not be in the logs anymore. We may have already rolled them over. I'm just checking. Did we lose Bobby? He may have dropped off. I think so. I'm sure he's trying to reconnect. So while he does that, let's carry on. So we've got now the initial compromise. We know what happened to start this off. So there was an exploitable service. Still trying to figure out what else they've done. What would people like to try next? We can do either more server analysis, because that card was successful. We can use it again. Endpoint analysis. We've had votes in the past for the SIEM to go and look at events in the SIEM. What would people like to try next? One vote for the SIEM analysis. Couple of votes on that one. Anybody think anything else is more important to try first? Should we go for that one?
I think server analysis again might help us identify any malicious executables or programs and whatnot running, processes rather, on the server. Whereas the SIEM seems to be a low success rate given the information on the card. You have to be logging the right things and whatnot.
True. Anybody who's voting for SIEM want to another +1 for server? Anybody who's voting for SIEM want to defend the choice or talk more to it? Another +1 for server. Another +1 for server. We have 1 vote for endpoint analysis. Server analysis again seems to be winning. Okay, why don't we try that one again? So again, the server analysis is, you can follow the SANS cheat sheets, but basically go in there, look, see what else you can find that might provide more insights. So if we roll for that one again, and it's still an established procedure, so it's a +3. And that one this time didn't work. Could be that maybe there wasn't anything there, or just we weren't successful in finding it. So that clears off the isolation card again, although maybe it's a bit late for that. But our server analysis for the second time didn't achieve anything new. And the same question always applies, when it doesn't work. Any thoughts on why it may not have worked? that second time through, trying to do it a bit more. I think we had some good discussion about why it would be a good thing to try, but given the result that it didn't achieve anything new, what might have been the reason for that? Any thoughts?
I would imagine there's either too much information, we're not looking in the right places, or the information is no longer there. So maybe the process is the malicious process is terminated, and that it's a self-deleting malware
Yeah.
or something or other like that, or it's just migrated to another host somewhere else in the network.
Yeah, totally. Any of those. I mean, we always keep in mind too, it might be that it's there and we just don't find it. Like go through the logs, miss the line. That's super important. Yeah, that's a really good one in chat. It could be masquerading as a legitimate process. So some sort of hidden process. We've seen lots of that from malware, especially on the server side, totally hiding their presence. Okay. There's 6 more turns and 20 minutes to go. So we're making progress. We figured out our initial exploit. What do people want to try next? And it can be, either one of the established procedures or any one of the others. So that the vote for SEAM is back again. Another one with a thumbs up. Couple more. We've got a new one there. So a user, so that's where's that card? This one. User and entity behavior analytics. We haven't had that one talked about before. So this is looking at, is the same user logged in like 4 times, or are they logged in from New York and then from China in 10 seconds apart or something like that? I've got a good point there that the system still needs to be isolated to attempt and prevent spread. Yeah, that's true. More votes. I'm seeing still 3. It looks like 3. Yeah, 3 votes for SEAM, 4 votes for SEAM, 1 for user, and 4 votes for isolation. We've got a tie between isolation and SEAM. Oh, isolation is breaking ahead. Oh, SEAM is. These guys are neck and neck. Anybody who's voting for either one of those want to come off mute and share rationales? Another vote for isolation. Rationale above. Fair enough. Okay, it looks like isolation is in the lead. Yes, we did try isolation without success, but it was a dice roll. And Gabrielle's a good point there. We didn't really know what we were isolating. So now we know that there was a exploitable service. We may have taken the server off in some respects, but if they've already have persistence, like maybe we blocked its connection to the rest of the world, but if somebody had already established persistence on that server, they still could be doing nasty things internally. Maybe we didn't succeed in our attempts to isolate it. We thought, oh, we'll block port 443 and that'll solve it. And it turned out they were using some other channel. So there's lots of reasons why isolation may not have worked the first time. And it was just a dice roll. So yeah, it should have worked completely in terms of command and control if we were completely firewalled, and that's true. And maybe we weren't. But it sounds like people want to try that one again. And I totally get the rationale. It makes perfect sense. So are we good to try isolation one more time? I think so. Okay. So let me roll for that one. We'll see what happens. It's also a +3. Unfortunately, and I think the dice are being rather nasty today. That again didn't result in any further. And I think the best way to describe it is it didn't shed any light on what's going on. I think it's good to note that isolation is something you want to do anyway, but it might not help you understand what the problem is. It just it's a good practice to prevent it from spreading, but in this case, it's not helping us find out more about what might be going on. And in some cases it would, but in this case it didn't. And that's mainly what the dice roll is telling us happened in this case. Welcome back, Bobby. So just to fill you in, Bobby, they tried isolation a second time, and it didn't achieve any new. Oh yes, thank you. It didn't achieve any new results. Difference between the server and the memory analysis. So if I pop up the card, so this would be specifically an inspection of RAM. So what is currently in RAM, looking at, some malware will execute, sit in RAM and completely delete all evidence of it off disk. So if you start looking at the disk, you won't see anything, but you have to look through the memory entirely. So that's the distinction between the memory analysis. The server analysis is more looking across the server, looking at, what might be installed on it, configs, things that are running, but that you can also spot off the disk. It's the main difference. They're very closely related in a lot of respects. Are you back in the saddle, Bobby? Do you want me to hand it back over to you?
Yeah, I can hear everything again. Sorry about that. My system just completely crashed and just ate it. So where are we now?
We've got we're getting ready for another attempt. We haven't revealed any more cards, and it looks like there's 3 votes to attempt the user and entity behavior analytics.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so for like patterns, like things that are out of the ordinary. And do you have the screen, the share up right now? Or?
Yeah, should be up.
My display setting probably is the second screen.
And we've got one more note on cyber deception, trying to catch the attacker and see if they're still fishing around for other devices. Yeah, absolutely.
Does memory analysis include like what files and ports and other resources certain processes have open, or would that be belong to another card? I'm just thinking that if that's the case, we could use it to identify malicious processes, but if not, then my vote goes with the UEBA.
Memory analysis would usually identify anything that's like if it's currently working in memory. So if it's currently running and it's got open ports, then yeah, you'd probably be able to detect that with memory analysis. Versus if it was adding or changing a configuration file, you wouldn't. That's maybe a good way to describe it.
Yeah, so often by the time an action is sort of written to disk, it's kind of cold. It's not really sort of hot in the same sense that it's in progress or sort of settled.
Okay, then I'll go with UEBA, but then if that card doesn't work, then I'll say memory analysis. Try to identify malicious processes on the compromised machine.
Okay, it sounds like
Memory now.
user and entity behavior analytics is
Memory. Right.
the next most popular.
Okay, well then let's see here. So I am so in this context right now we are we've gotten as far as establishing the external service that the PHP was the I guess the vector for their initial compromise, and what we're trying to I guess make sense of is I guess the mechanism by means of which access was then able to presumably spread from that VM further in either within the alliance sort of HPC environment or that institutional server.
Yeah, yeah, or even just what else is going on in general.
I guess that makes sense. Like if there was you might see other anomalous kind of patterns or behaviors or things that basically that are outliers in the logs that might be able to further elucidate.
Okay, so are we going to roll for user and entity behavior analytics? Sounds like it.
Let's do it.
Okay, see what happens. The dice are being very mean.
Right? And that was a +3, but it wasn't even a +3, so it was a.
Oh yeah, I shouldn't have even rolled a +3. Apologies. Still didn't work.
So
so that's unfortunately 3 strikes in a row,
right.
which means we're stuck with an inject card. Let's see what happens.
Material impacts on the gameplay. Some of them are just kind of absurd. Let's see here. Okay. Right.
So this one, I think I can make it big. There we go.
So lead handler as a baby. And I actually saw a video of another group playing through this game, wherein this was actually a circumstance or scenario that somebody in the audience recounted, like having happened to them, and they're like, "Oh, why don't you take a look at this next card?" And it was, it clearly does happen, or analogous. And so the context here is like basically that your lead incident responder has had a kid and is away, has to leave on a paternity or maternity leave on short notice, meaning that essentially as an inject, what it would mean is that the person who I guess if to the extent that one person may be carrying around or like a session of the game, then that person I guess would be then kind of sort of like silenced, I guess, for the next round, for the next for I guess the next kind of is it the next turn, I believe.
Yeah.
The idea there is to kind of coax the quieter people, the lurkers, into also sort of stepping up. But I think in this context, I think it seems like the participation has been fairly sort of.
Yeah, I'd say we've been pretty even.
Yeah.
We're down to 7 minutes remaining.
Right.
So what do people want to try next? See if we can at least get one more of these cards. If the die will cooperate with us, because it's been pretty nasty.
And it's like the dynamics of the discussion also it's affected, I guess, to the extent that in this context we're kind of generalizing it for the alliance or the context or the infrastructure, whereas within the context of if you specify within a given host site wherein you would have a sense of particular configurations and controls that are in place, then it also becomes I guess more insightful for sure. But so the other other than user and entity behavior analytics, the other one that was just being discussed was memory analysis, was it?
Yep, that's popped into the chat. Memory analysis next with a thumbs up already, 2 thumbs up.
Look at that.
Another
no.
one for firewall log review. I've got 4 votes for memory analysis, 5 votes for memory analysis, 2 for firewall log.
Well, let's go with some based on that.
Sounds like memory analysis.
Yeah, let's do that. So,
This one is not a +3, so we really have to hope this guy will do a better job. But let's give it a try and hope for something better. Okay, trying this. Finally.
there you go.
Just.
Okay, and now analysis, was it part of the sections for
Yes.
escalate? I believe it was.
So this is a successful, you do find something new. And when you look at the memory, you realize that they've established persistence by setting up a malicious service on that server.
Right. I believe, yeah, it was context that we kind of were envisioning or had in mind was one of the interpreter persistence modules that are referenced there that are kind of adjacent to Metasploit. So yeah, so I mean, here we essentially like the mechanism for the pivoting and the escalating or the C2 wasn't really elucidated or reflected in the active memory of the host, but we did find something useful pertaining to a service that shouldn't have been there or that was not legitimate, but that was sort of recurring. So that's another sort of piece of the puzzle. In terms of just looking at time, we only have about 4 minutes left. So I'm just wondering, do we want to carry on, or is there any, I guess, like?
I guess we could do one of 2 things. We could reveal the whole scenario and just talk through it. There's been a lot of great ideas, especially in coming in the chat. Appreciate everybody who's been chatting. But we could reveal the rest of the scenario and just walk through it maybe before we run out of time. Want me to do that?
Yeah, let's do that. So,
okay. So you found that it was an exploitable external service. They've actually installed a new malicious service in addition. The pivot and escalation in this was to create a new service or modify something that was existing.
right.
Endpoint analysis would have found that as well.
And therein,
Thwarted by the die.
right. In terms of the details,
No
there,
vote.
right. I believe it was that basically with what because the web app was connecting directly to the database at the other institution, and that they were able to connect through an allow list or kind of like a whitelisted IP entry in their firewall. It was leveraging that. So,
And then finally,
yeah, the other piece of information that we were going to that was going to kind of turn up was going to be longer, basically in terms of log entries, longer, denser DNS records that were in data was being essentially backed into DNS queries. So that would be yeah, DNS as a command and control channel. Which again, it's read and firewall log review. So firewall log review is quite salient for this one.
yeah, and we did do the firewall log review once, but in that case we found the or no, we didn't. We did server analysis, or I think firewall log was unsuccessful.
So like I'll mention, like, just for my own sake, like in kind of going over the scenario and preparing it, like I one question I had that came to my mind was, what does DNS being used as a C2 look like? Like when that occurs, if that's happening in the infrastructure, how would that appear? What are signs and symptoms of that? And then that prompted me to go Googling a little bit and to kind of look at some examples of like a log entries of DNS records that you would see kind of on the wire. in a context where data is being kind of packed into it. So where you might have like a subdomain of something.com, where that subdomain is like a get yada yada yada, or post, or maybe not. Maybe it's just binary data, massive strings. So yeah, so that kind of, again, the idea of the game is to kind of get you thinking about where the gaps are in the infrastructure, and to get people communicating about the controls and the solutions that they have in place. With that, I think it's just about at time. So is there any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, that's time. So that's the game. And as I put it in the chat, we can drop it in the security Slack channel for the Alliance as well.
And there's
if anybody wants to try it, it's a free online. There's lots of variations and lots of videos as well.
There's a competitive version both on Discord and one on Steam, I believe. And there's lots of YouTube videos of them playing through it, like different conferences with some celebrity kind of cybersecurity hacker characters. Some of them are pretty good, and yeah, definitely would recommend checking that out if it's all interesting to you. Okay, thanks so much, guys.
Awesome. Okay.
Cheers.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the session. I've learned a lot, and thanks for sharing also the link. I hope everyone will enjoy the rest of their day.
Thanks so much.